information that has been dropped. So we do have 3 tiers of that's got started already. 3 tiers of access. First of all, we got the free access tier, which basically comprises of online multiplayer and solo for the seasonal campaign that it gets updated quarterly. And also you get access to the replay editor, for almost fully featured, with the restriction being to that you can only save 1 track at a time. You also get to compete into the original rankings for the solo campaign, and you also and as I said, multiplayer is through the arcade mode, which is hosted on Nadeo's campaign servers. Then you've got the standard edition, which is costing €10 or $10 per year, depending on where you live, which basically comprises all the standard access, plus the ability to join dedicated servers, and also the ability to save more than 1 map at a time, basically unlimited saves on the map editor, creating and sharing race replays without restrictions. And at the end of the year of access, you get to keep the 4 quarterly campaigns, so 100 official maps and the 365 track of the days that have been released throughout the year. So 465 tracks in total for 1 year of access that you get to keep seas after that access is over. And then you have club access, which is either $30 a year or $60 for 3 years, one-time payment for 3 years, non-recurring, it must be said, where you get the ability to get all the stuff from the standard access, plus the ability to create your own club, host your own servers, own online rooms or dedicated servers, and also get to compete in the Grand League. So that's the basic recap of what's to offer with the various Trackmania model pricing. And fair to say that the casual community did not really like it, it must be said, with the various rumblings that we heard on the internet. I feel like, Eirik, you maybe, I feel like I should give it off to you with something you've been recollecting, especially over the past few days.
Well, I can first then jump back to once I first got the information about these different prices. My first impression was actually positive, because I was afraid that they will look everything behind like a paid wall, maybe like Turbo, or everything you had to pay for everything. So once I heard Hilde said free, I was like, okay, at least we have something that's free. And then obviously I was happy about that. And I think it was episode 2 or if it was episode 1, I said that I believe that this was going to be paid for, because then you have the financial security. It's a small game, so if you're just going to base it on free and hope that there are some microtransactions within the game that's going to get them to eventually earn some money from it, maybe that's a bit risky. So I understood that as well. So somewhat expecting, but I'm positive surprised by just having that starter access so people can somewhat try it out. And from my experience after the interview I did with who was out and after the information was out on Wednesday last week, some people in the, let's call it hardcore scene, of course, was not too pleased with it, but the major feedback I got is that they're actually pleased with it. And it's not till lately, like the last 2 days or 3 days, that I actually went outside this hardcore bubble, went into Reddit, and now today it's been with these major news articles and videos that maybe you get the feeling about is the outside audience, maybe the audience outside the Trackmania players at the moment that we hope will be new players in Trackmania. Are they pleased with it? And I cannot say yes there, and that's maybe a little bit scary, because eventually we hope that this new game will get a new players. That's the main goal for us. That's the biggest hope for us. So positive surprise, but also now that I see more and more feedback from the so-called casual gamers, then maybe a little bit more worried than I was last Wednesday once I heard it.
Yeah, I mean, kind of my thoughts on how this all kind of came about. I mean, when we were discussing potential price points and how the money factor would come into this game, if it would at all, it is interesting to see they went with a method which we did, of course, talk about it being paid for in terms of a standard cost. However, they've kind of gone for a little bit of an off-the-wall method, packaging it as, I mean, let's essentially say a sporting license, a subscription, however you want to name it. it's essentially a paid-for service, basically, whatever name you wish to use for it. So kind of nothing I think we really exactly predicted, but in kind of looking back at it, given the other options we were discussing, it seems to be an option more suited to a game like Trackmania, given that the size of the community, and this, especially the size of the community that is actually properly committed to the future of the game. You know, the people who would be buying things like whatever microtransactions there would be in order to give some sort of influx that would actually even be relevant in that case. Numbers that will actually matter to them and encourage them to continue to contribute towards the growth of the game. So I was interested to see that they did end up going for that sort of approach, but the main concern for me was how it was brought about. It seemed to me, as Eirik was saying, that a lot of people aren't very well pleased with the information that's being released, but in my opinion, it feels more... not necessarily that people aren't necessarily pleased with the plan as to how much the game's going to cost, how the game's going to generate money. They're more angry or dissatisfied, shall I rephrase that, because the way it's been communicated has been very subpar. A lot of things have been extremely confusing. Things haven't been really clear. What do you get with specific editions? Although they've kind of gave a few highlights here and there. This is what you get if you've got the club edition. This is what you get if you get the standard edition. There was still many asterisks left there, like the track editor. There was suggestion almost that it wasn't included as part of the free edition, but that's later been kind of clarified a little bit more. And some other kind of minor points here and there, like can you play on servers if you're a free version, if you're a standard version, you know, things like that, if you can't create servers, for example. So I'm not angry at the price point system. I am more unhappy at how they delivered the information, as I felt it led to a lot of kind of unnecessary confusion.
Yeah, I do have to agree with the communication part of the whole thing. The entire system itself isn't bad at all. I feel like it's probably the best way that could have possibly gone around in terms of monetizing Trackmania and try to generate a steady revenue stream from it. Going for his, I think it was Speedy that was actually discussing about it on Twitter and on Discord. The game as a service approach for Trackmania isn't exactly one that's been tried before, and it feels like it doesn't really hurt to try, since if they got such big plans for this game, like regularly updating with content, supporting the esports side with the Grand League and stuff like that. Well, if we can't take into account that plus the fact that you have to pay the developers. They got bills to pay. They got food. They got to feed themselves. They got a family to house and whatever. Well, you start to realize that basically the standard model of basically selling wholesale copies, like buy one, keep forever, like we've had previously, isn't really quite doing the math, because you can only get people to buy your game so much until eventually you cannot sell enough copies to keep the revenue stream going, and eventually the plan for the game falls apart. So I feel like the subscription model is definitely good, but yeah, the way that it was worded around was basically not that well worded, which led to a lot of the shitstorm. But in my opinion, if I'm allowed to go off on a tangent and get slightly angry here, I've been reading some of the comments in the past few days over the internet. So, like for instance, Reddit threads that were talking about the subscription service and also how they mishandled the communication, and a lot of the casual players, well, basically riled up about the fact that Trackmania was moving to a paid subscription system rather than a standard buy once keep forever model. And there was generally I feel like it was a lot. I felt a lot of hatred when I read some of these comments, and they felt like, and I felt like, I know it may not have been said, but for me, like, it felt like whenever I picture that in my head, I feel like, oh, if they go bankrupt within 6 months, then that's good for them. They deserve that. Fuck you. It's not the end of the fucking world if we move to a freaking game as a service subscription. If the game allows if that potentially allows the game to survive a little bit more time in the long run, especially with the stuff that's planned for the game. So become hold your horses, hold your tits, hold them tight, and be along for the ride. Because I feel like even though that will irk some people, I still feel like we can see some decent numbers turning in from for the game itself. And I know personally that I will be on the new game. I did order this the club edition because I plan to do stuff on it, and I'd suggest that for most people, the $10 a year standard edition is probably more than enough. So this game is definitely not as it's not as pricey as people first see. Like, they see basically $3 in and they go, oh no! And they should really calm down at that price point. They don't need to buy the $30 a year or the $60 for 3 years. That's only if you are really invested in the game. $10 a year, perfectly fine. And if you want to give it a little bit of a try before you buy, free version's there. And people tend to seem to forget that.